in the quiet heart of a picturesque English town, where cobblestone streets wind past ivy-clad cottages and ancient oaks whisper tales of centuries past. A story unfolded that would challenge the notion that privilege guarantees an easy life. It was the winter of 1987, in the hallowed halls of St. Augustine's, a prestigious private school nestled in the frosty outskirts of London. Here, among the elite, a boy named James Whitmore, small and unassuming, carried a legacy he never boasted about. The son of a high-ranking royal officer, James was no stranger to expectations. Yet he chose silence over swagger, humility over pride. But in the eyes of one teacher, a man hardened by bias and control, this quiet boy became a target. On a bitterly cold day, when the wind howled and the world seemed to hold its breath, everything changed. A moment of injustice met with an unexpected reckoning, proving that true strength lies not in power, but in integrity. St. Augustine's was a bastion of tradition, its Gothic arches and stained glass windows casting long shadows over manicured lawns. Each Monday morning, as the first light of dawn pierced the winter mist, students gathered in the courtyard, their breath forming clouds of white in the frigid air. Clad in navy blazers and crimson ties, they stood in neat rows, their faces flushed from the cold, their voices hushed under the watchful eyes of their teachers. The school was a crucible for the children of Britain's elite diplomats, lords, and military luminaries, where discipline and excellence were not just expected, but demanded. It was a place where reputations were built, where futures were shaped, and where the weight of legacy could be both a shield and a burden. James Whitmore, just 12 years old, was the newest arrival at St. Augustine's. With his sandy hair, earnest hazel eyes, and a frame that seemed too slight for the heavy wool of his uniform, he was a boy who blended into the background. His father, Colonel Edward Whitmore, was a decorated officer in the British Army, a man whose name commanded respect in military circles. Yet James never spoke of him. He was polite to a fault, his manners impeccable, his voice soft but clear when called upon. In class, he sat at the back, his notebook filled with meticulous notes, his attention unwavering even as whispers and giggles swirled around him. To his peers, he was an enigma, kind but reserved, present but distant. To a teacher, however, he was something else entirely. A challenge, a threat, a boy who needed to be broken. Mr. Reginald Smith, the history teacher, was a towering figure in both stature and reputation. With thinning gray hair and a perpetual scowl, he ruled his classroom with an iron fist. Known for his sharp tongue and favoritism toward the sons of wealthy donors, Smith had a knack for spotting weakness and exploiting it. His lessons were less about history than about power, his questions designed to elevate some and humiliate others. From the moment James arrived, Smith sensed something in the boy's quiet demeanor. A strength he couldn't control, a dignity that grated against his need for dominance. James, with his unassuming nature and impeccable manners, became a target, a canvas for Smith's cruelty. A boy who, in the teacher's eyes, needed to be taught his place. The trouble began subtly, as such things often do. In a history lesson on the Battle of Agincourt, Smith singled James out, firing a barrage of obscure questions about medieval tactics, questions no 12-year-old could reasonably answer. "Whitmore," he barked, his voice dripping with disdain. "Surely the son of a colonel knows the exact formation of the French cavalry." The classroom erupted in snickers, the sons of bankers and barristers exchanging smirks. James, his face flushing, stammered a partial answer, his voice steady but uncertain. Smith pounced, his words cutting like a blade. "Pathetic. I expected more from a Whitmore. Perhaps your father's rank is all you have to offer." The laughter grew louder, a chorus of cruelty that echoed in James's ears as he lowered his gaze, his hands clenched beneath the desk. The incident was only the beginning. Smith's campaign against James intensified, each lesson a new opportunity to mock, to belittle, to isolate. He criticized James's handwriting, his posture, his failure to meet the school's lofty standards. The other boys, sensing weakness, joined in, their taunts a daily ritual in the corridors and canteen. James endured it all in silence, his hazel eyes betraying no anger, only a quiet resolve. He wrote letters to his mother, carefully omitting the worst of his days, and spent evenings in the library, losing himself in books about knights and battles, dreaming of a courage he wasn't sure he possessed. But Smith was relentless, his cruelty cloaked in the guise of discipline, his authority unchallenged by colleagues who feared his influence or shared his biases. The tipping point came on a frost-bitten December morning, when the school's courtyard was blanketed in a thin layer of snow. The lesson was on the Magna Carta, and Smith, in a mood fouler than usual, targeted James once more. He posed a question about the Baron's demands, deliberately vague. And when James hesitated, Smith's voice boomed, "Useless. Whitmore, you're a disgrace to your name." The class laughed, their breath visible in the cold air, as James's cheeks burned with shame. But Smith wasn't finished. In a calculated act of cruelty, he ordered James to clean the courtyard after school, a punishment reserved for the worst offenders. "Perhaps some manual labor will teach you humility," he sneered, dismissing the class to their warm dormitories while James was left to face the biting wind alone. The courtyard was a frozen expanse, the snow crunching under James's boots as he gripped a worn broom. The wind howled, slicing through his thin blazer, numbing his fingers and stinging his face. Each sweep of the broom was an effort, the cold seeping into his bones. But James did not complain. He worked methodically, his breath forming clouds, his mind replaying Smith's words, his heart heavy but unbroken. The other boys watched from the windows, some giggling, others uneasy, but none dared intervene. The teachers, bundled in their offices, turned a blind eye, their silence a tacit endorsement of Smith's authority. James swept until his hands bled, the broom's handle slick with frost. Yet he pressed on, driven by a stubborn pride he could not name. Unbeknownst to James, a figure watched from the edge of the courtyard, his presence unnoticed amid the flurry of snow. Colonel Edward Whitmore, James's father, had arrived unannounced, summoned by a vague instinct that something was amiss. At 3 feet, Edward was a man of quiet strength, his face weathered by years of command, his uniform adorned with medals that told of battles fought and lives saved. He had served in the Falklands, led men through the chaos of conflict, and earned the respect of generals and privates alike. But his greatest pride was his son, a boy he had raised to value honor above all else, standing in the shadows. Edward observed the scene, his son, small and shivering, sweeping a courtyard under the weight of an unjust punishment. His jaw tightened, but he did not act, not yet. He watched, his eyes narrowing, as James endured, each sweep a testament to a resilience Edward recognized as his own. The conflict escalated the following week, when Smith's cruelty reached new heights. During another history lesson, James, emboldened by a rare moment of clarity, answered a question about the Norman conquest with precision, his voice steady, his facts impeccable. The class fell silent, expecting praise, but Smith's face twisted with contempt. "Correct, Whitmore, but your delivery is sloppy. You think you're clever." Before James could respond, Smith ordered him to kneel in the hallway for the remainder of the period. A punishment as humiliating as it was archaic. "Perhaps some time on your knees will teach you respect," he spat, slamming the classroom door. James obeyed, his knees pressing into the cold stone, his head bowed, but his spirit unbroken. The other teachers, passing by, averted their eyes, their fear of Smith's influence outweighing their sense of justice. The boys whispered, some mocking, others uncomfortable, but none dared challenge the status quo. Edward Whitmore, alerted by a concerned librarian who had witnessed James's punishments, arrived at the school that afternoon. He did not storm in, did not raise his voice, did not demand answers. Instead, he stood at the end of the hallway, his greatcoat dusted with snow, his eyes fixed on his son. James, still kneeling, did not see him, but Edward saw everything. The boy's trembling hands, the defiance in his posture, the quiet dignity that no punishment could strip away. The colonel's heart swelled with pride, but his mind turned to strategy. He knew that confronting Smith directly would only escalate the conflict, emboldening the teacher's sense of power. Instead, Edward stepped into the headmaster's office, his presence commanding yet restrained, and made a single phone call. The words were brief, his tone measured, but the impact would be seismic. The next morning, St. Augustine's awoke to an unexpected announcement. A delegation from the Royal Inspectorate, a body tasked with overseeing the nation's most elite institutions, had arrived for an unannounced review. The news sent a ripple of unease through the faculty, their usual composure fraying at the edges. The inspectors, clad in somber suits, moved with quiet authority, their clipboards a silent threat. Over 3 days, they scrutinized every aspect of the school curriculum: discipline, teacher conduct, student welfare. They interviewed students in private, their questions gentle but probing, coaxing out truths long buried. Boys spoke of Smith's favoritism, his cruelty, his penchant for targeting those who didn't fit his mold. Girls recounted similar stories, their voices trembling but resolute. James, called to the headmaster's office, told his story with a calm that belied his age, his words simple but piercing, his honesty a light in the darkness. The results were swift and uncompromising. On the third day, Mr. Smith was summoned to the headmaster's office, his usual swagger replaced by a pallor of dread. The inspectors presented their findings: a pattern of bias, verbal abuse, and unethical conduct, corroborated by dozens of students, and even a few courageous teachers. Smith was suspended indefinitely. His career at St. Augustine's effectively over, his reputation in tatters. The announcement was made at the weekly assembly. The students gathered in the grand hall, their breath visible in the chilly air. The headmaster, a stern but fair man named Dr. Alistair Grayson, took the podium, his voice heavy with emotion. "We have failed some of you," he said, his eyes sweeping the room. "But today, we begin to make it right. We have learned a lesson from one among us, a lesson in patience, in dignity, in the power of doing what is right, even when it is hard." To the astonishment of all, Dr. Grayson called James Whitmore to the stage. The boy, small and unassuming, walked forward, his steps steady despite the hundreds of eyes upon him. The headmaster placed a hand on his shoulder, his voice breaking as he spoke. "James Whitmore has shown us what it means to be truly noble. His patience, his integrity, his refusal to bend under injustice. These are the qualities we must all aspire to." The hall erupted in applause, not the mocking laughter of before, but a wave of respect that washed over James like a warm tide. His classmates, once complicit in his isolation, stood, their clapping a silent apology. "A promise to be better." James, his hazel eyes bright with unshed tears, managed a small smile, his heart full, but his humility unchanged. The aftermath transformed St. Augustine's. The school implemented new policies on bullying, teacher accountability, and student welfare, guided by the inspector's recommendations. The faculty, chastened by the ordeal, embraced a culture of fairness, their lessons infused with a newfound respect for their charges. The students, inspired by James's example, formed a peer support group, a safe space for those who felt unheard. James himself became a quiet leader, not through speeches or bravado, but through his actions, helping a struggling classmate, standing up for a younger boy, listening when others needed to speak. His peers, once a distant, grew to love him, their nicknames shifting from mockery to affection. Whitmore the Wise. They called him a nod to the boy who had taught them all. Colonel Edward Whitmore, watching from the sidelines, never took credit for the inspector's visit. He returned to his duties, his pride in his son, a private flame that warmed him through the coldest nights. He and James spoke little of the incident, their bond strengthened by an unspoken understanding. Edward knew that his call had set the wheels in motion, but it was James's resilience, his refusal to break, that had won the day. He saw in his son the makings of a leader, a man who would carry the Whitmore name with the same honor he had. A plaque was erected at the school's entrance, its words carved in elegant script. Integrity is doing the right thing, even when no one is watching. It became a touchstone for generations of students, a reminder of the boy who had changed saints. Augustine's with his silent strength. The courtyard, once a place of punishment, was transformed into a garden, its benches inscribed with quotes about courage and kindness. James, now a memory in the school's history, left a legacy that outlived his time there, a ripple that spread far beyond the frosty winters of 1987. The story of James Whitmore is a testament to the power of quiet resilience, a reminder that strength is not in the loudest voice, but in the steadiest heart. It is a story of a boy who faced injustice with dignity, who endured cruelty with grace, and who, without raising a fist or a voice, sparked a reckoning that changed a school, a community, a legacy. It challenges us to look within, to ask what we would do when faced with unfairness, to consider the weight of our choices. When the world seemed stacked against us, James's triumph was not in revenge, but in perseverance, in the simple act of standing tall when others expected him to fall. If you've ever faced or witnessed injustice in your own life, what did you do? Did you stay silent? Or did you find the courage to stand up, like James? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us about the moments that tested you, the choices that defined you, the lessons that stay with you still. And if you're moved by stories like this, stories of heart, honor, and the quiet victories that shape us, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell. Join us as we share more tales that inspire, that uplift, that remind us of the good in the world every single day.